Good day, everybody. This is Yin Yang in California with Morsels of a Thought number 1517. Consecutive days, no holidays, no breaks. We've been here. We've been here to entertain you a little bit, inspire you to have a great day. We're here to give you morsels of a thought, morsels of a thought of wisdom every day for us to know the right things to do. Knowing the right things to do is called wisdom. Doing them is virtue. And I want to make the world more full of virtue. I didn't know I could do it from this little place. I didn't know that I could influence people. But I've been influencing people a lot. I mean, we don't see very many people on the live show, but there's a lot of people coming to the replays. And I see that we are getting people who are interested in different subjects on different days. Like today is Wisdom Wednesday, and I go into some quotes and some stories and the Book of Virtues by William J. Bennett, and we do some Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu so far, an illustrated journey here. And Tao Te Ching, Tao means the way, De means the virtue, and Jing means the scripture. So Jing means scripture. Every house has a sad scripture, is a saying in Chinese. 家家有本难念的经. Every household has a scripture that is difficult to read. There are sad stories in every family. That's what they say. It's what the Chinese have said. It's a proverb. So let's go without further ado. Suzanne Shamut, hello, hello. John Clark's wife, Tom Krebs's wife, Tom Krebs, Tara Darnell Roberts. There, I got a few names there that come over here in the dark and come and see the replays. Now, we were on a story called in Perseverance. I forgot to put that in the header. In memory of LHW. We were reading this here. Let me see how many more pages we have. We may be able to get to the end of today. In memory of LHW is a story by Dorothy Canfield Fisher, and there's a note by William J. Bennett about it. This is a story of a lifetime struggle made noble by compassion, responsibility, work, and a host of other virtues. It reminds us that in helping others persevere, we find the strength and courage and purpose to persevere ourselves. Vermont writer Dorothy Canfield Fisher, who lived from 1879 to 1958, said, excuse me, she said that as a child, she knew the protagonist of this story, a New England farmer born to a hard life. Hey, excuse me. Pardon me. A New England farmer born to a hard life, and one day she realized he was a saint. So this is a story about a man that she knew in New England. She was from Vermont. She lived from 1879 to 1958, and she's focused on letting people know about this saint virtue stuff, what he did. Now, I lost my page. Okay, there we are. So I will read the first sentence of each paragraph we read last time. First and last sentence of each paragraph, and that way we'll have an idea of what we read last time, and then we'll continue on. So, and I'll read the first whole paragraph. He began life characteristically depreciated and disparaged. When he was a white, thin, big-headed baby, his mother, stripping the suds from her lean arms, used to inveigh her neighbors against his existence. Wanted it just like that duelist, Jim Warren, not even to leave me foot free when he died, but a baby coming. Do-less, in the language of our valley, means a combination of shiftless and impractical, particularly to be scorned. Later, as he began to have some resemblance to the appearance he was to wear throughout life, her resentment at her marriage, which she considered the one mistake of her life, kept pace with his growth. "Look at him!" she cried to anyone who would listen. "Shut your mouth, for Lord's sake, Lem, and maybe you won't scare folks quite so much." But he looked like his father. Lem had a foolish, apologetic grin with which he always used to respond to these personalities, hanging his head to one side and opening and shutting his big hands nervously. The tumble-down two-roomed house in which the Warrens lived was across the road from the schoolhouse, and Mrs. Warren's voice was penetrating. He chopped the wood and brought it in, swept the floor and made the fires, then listened to the in grinning silent admiration while the others, arrayed in their best, spoke pieces and sang songs. The schoolroom. He was not smart at his books, quote unquote, and indeed did not learn even to read very fluently. They tyrannized over him unmercifully, as in fact everyone did. Nothing made his mother more furious than such an exhibition of what she called Lem's meachiness. "Ain't you got no standing up in ye? If you don't look out for yourself in this world, you needn't think anybody else is going to." The instructions, he wrote it very colorfully, the instructions in ethics he received at her hands were the only ones he ever knew, for up to his 14th year he never had clothes respectable enough to wear to church, and after that he had other things to think of. After that, the long, unprofitable months of enforced schooling would be over. Lem would be earning steady wages, and she could sit back and live decent, quote unquote. It seemed to her more than she could bear that almost upon her son's birthday, she was stricken down with paralysis. She cannot have been a cheerful housemate during the next 10 years when Lem was growing silently to manhood. He was in demand as help on the farms about him on account of his great strength and faithfulness, although the farmers found him exasperatingly slow, and when it was a question of animals, not always sure to obey orders. He was, they used to inform him in conclusion, the most do-less critter the Lord ever made. He was better with cows and sheep. Feller feeling, his mother said scornfully, watching him feed a sick ewe, and he had here, even in comparison with his fellow man, a fair degree of success. There were several twin lambs born that spring, and everyone lived. Lem used to make frequent night visits during lunch lambing time to the pasture to make sure that all was well. "I remember," the author says, "as a little girl starting back from some village festivity late one spring night and seeing a lantern twinkle up on the mountainside. The lantern lighted Lem's weather-beaten face and the expression in his eyes as he looked down at the little white head against his breast. He had a lamb in his arms. "You are foolish, Lynn," said Uncle. "The year won't own it if you take it away so long the first night." I I know," stuttered Lamb, bringing out the words with his usual difficulty, "but it's mortal cold up on the mountain for little fellers. I'll bring him up as a cosset." The incident reminded me vaguely of something I had read about, and it has remained in my memory. After we drove on, I remember that there were laughing speculations about what language old Ma'am Warren would use at having another cosset brought to the house. Chained to her chair by her paralyzed legs as she was, she could accomplish nothing more than to sit and cavil at the management of the universe all day until Lem came home, gave her her supper, and put her to bed. Badly run, as she thought the world for a time, it was more favorable to her material property than she had ever known it. They even pointed out the particular big collie dog who would most likely go sheep mad. Sheep mad. Lamb's heavy face drew into anxious, grotesque wrinkles at this kind of talk, and he visited the uplying pasture more and more frequently. That's the key. One morning, just before dawn, he came pale and shamefaced to the home of the owner of the collie. They, they was all over blood, you know. They peered at him in the gray light, half afraid of the tall apparition. How could you kill a great big dog like Jack? They asked wonderingly. In answer, he held out his great hands and his huge corded arms, red with blood up to the elbow. I heard him worrying another sheep, and I just killed him. One of the children now cried out, "But I shut Jackie up in the woodshed last night." Someone ran to open the door, and the collie bounded out. I felt awful bad afterward. I knew your young ones thought a sight of Jack, he stuttered. "But what dog did you kill?" they asked. Some of the men went back up on the mountain with him and found, torn in pieces and scattered wide in bloody fragments, as if destroyed by some great revenging beast of prey, the body of a big gray wolf. Once in a while one wanders over the line from the Canada forests and comes down into our woods following the deer. The hard-headed farmers who looked at that savage scene drew back from the shambling man beside them in the only impulse of respect they ever felt for him. It was the one act of his life to secure the admiration of his fellow men. It was an action of which he himself always spoke in horror and shame. Certainly his marriage aroused no admiration. Lottie was a fool not to make that drummer marry her, says old man Warren. She could have if she'd gone the right way to work, but the drummer remained persistently absent. One evening, Lem, starting for his sheep pasture for his last look for the night, heard someone crying down by the river, and then, as he paused to listen, heard it no more. Then, leaving the scared and repentant child by his hearth, he brought her home. He set out on foot for the minister's house and dragged him back over the rough country roads. When Mam Warren awoke the next morning, Lem did not instantly answer her imperious call as he had done for so many years. "He give his bed to me, but he'll be in soon. I see him fussing around with the cows," says the young one, the new bride. Mam Warren stared, transfixed with a premonition of irremediable evil. Irremediable evil. "What you doing here?" she demanded, her voice devoid of expression through stupefaction. The girl held down her head. "Lem and I were married last night," she said. Then Mrs. Warren found her voice. When Lem came in, it was to a scene of the furious wrangling which was henceforth to fill his house. "To saddle himself with such trash as you," his mother was saying ragingly. His wife answered in kind, her vanity stung beyond endurance. "Nobody but a girl hard put to it would take up with a dribble-headed fool like Lem Warren." And then the bridegroom appeared at the door, and both women turned their attention to him. Here we're finally at the first sentence of the new part. "When the baby was born, Lottie was very sick. Lem took care of his mother, his wife, and the new baby for weeks and weeks. It was at lambing time, and his flock suffered from lack of attention, although as much as he dared to he left his sick women and tended his ewes. He ran in debt, too, to the grocery stores, where he could work very little and earned almost nothing. Of course, the neighbors helped out, but it was no cheerful morning's work to care for the vitriolic old woman, and Lottie was too vitriol. Green vitriol is an extremely harsh chemical that can clean glass easily. Vitriolic old woman, and Lottie was too sick for anyone but Lem to handle. We did pass the baby around from house to house during the worst of his siege to keep her off Lem's hands, but when Lottie began to get better, this is the author saying it, When Lottie began to get better, it was haying time. Everybody was more than busy, and the baby was sent back. Lottie lingered in semi-invalidism for about a year and then died, Lem holding her hand in his. She tried to say something to him that last night, so the neighbors who were there who reported, but her breath failed her, and she could only lie staring at him from eyes that seemed all ready to look from the other side of the grave. He was heavily in debt when he was thus left with a year-old child, not his own. Wow. But he gave Lottie a decent funeral and put up over her grave a stone stating that she was Charlotte, loved wife of Lemuel Warren, and that she died in the 18th year of her life. He used to take the little girl and put flowers on the grave, I remember. Then he went to work again. His sandy hair was already streaked with gray, though he was but 30. The doctor said the reason for this phenomenon was the great strain of his year of nursing, and indeed throughout that period of life no one knew when he slept, if ever. He was always up and dressed when anyone else was, and late at night we could look across and see his light still burning and know that he was rubbing Lottie's back or feeding little Susie. All that was changed now, of course. Susie was a strong, healthy child who slept all through the night in her little crib by her stepfather's corded bed, and in the daytime went everywhere he did. Wherever he worked out, quote unquote, he used to give her a nap wrapped in give her her nap wrapped in a horse blanket on the hay in the barn, and he carried her in a sling of his own contrivance to his sheep pasture. Old man Warren disliked the pretty, laughing child so bitterly that he was loath to leave her at home. But when he was there for her for the first time, he asserted himself against his mother, bidding her, when she began to berate the child's parentage, to be still, with so strange and unexpected an accent of authority that she was quite frightened. Susie was very fond of her stepfather at first, but when she came of school age, mixed with more of the older children, and heard laughing, contemptuous remarks about him, the frank and devouring egotism of childhood made her ashamed of her affection, ashamed of him with his uncouth gait, his mouth always sagging open, his stammering, ignorant speech, which the other children amused themselves by mocking. Though he was prospering again with his sheep, owned the pasture and his house now, and had even built on another room as well as repairing the older part, he spent little on his own adornment. It all went for pretty clothes for Susie, for better food, for books and pictures, for tickets for Susie to go to the circus and the county fair. Susie knew this and loved him by stealth for it, but the intolerably sensitive vanity of her 12 years made her wretched to be seen in public with him. Divining this, he ceased going with her to school picnics and Sunday school parties, where he had been a most useful pack animal, and dressing her in her best with his big calloused hands, watched her from the window join a group of the other children. Good morning, John Clark. His mother predicted savagely that his "spoilin' on that bad-blooded young one would bring her to no good end, and when at 15 Susie began to grow very pretty and saucy and wilful and to have beaux come to see her, the old woman exulted openly over Lem's helpless anxiety. He was quite gray now, although not yet 45, and so stooped that he passed for an old man. He owned a little farm. His flock of sheep was the largest in the township, and Susie was expected to make a good marriage in spite of her antecedents. And then Frank Gridley's oldest son, Ed, came back from business college with store clothes and city hats and polished tan shoes and began idling about calling on the girls. From the first, he and Susie ran together like two drops of water. Bronson Perkins, a cousin of mine, a big, silent, ruminative lad who had long hung about Susie, stood no show at all. One night in county fair week, Susie, who had gone to the fair with a crowd of girlfriends, was not at home at 10 o'clock. Lem, sitting in his doorway and watching the clock, heard the approach of the laughing, singing straw tide in which she had gone, with a long breath of relief. But the big hay wagon did not stop at his gate. He called after it in a harsh voice and was told that Ed Gridley and she went off to the hotel to get supper. He said he'd bring her home later. Lem went out to the barn, hitched up the faster of his two heavy plow horses, and drove from his house to Woodville, 8 miles and uphill in 45 minutes. When he went into the hotel, the clerk told him that the two he sought had had supper served in a private room. Lem ascertained which room and broke the door in with one heave of his shoulders. Susie sprang up from the disordered supper table and ran to him like a frightened child, clinging to him desperately and crying out that Ed scared her so. "It's all right now, Susie," he said gently, not looking at the man. "Papa's come to take you home." The man felt his dignity wounded. He began to protest boisterously and to declare that he was ready to marry the girl. "Now! This instant, if you choose!" Lem put one arm about Susie. "I didn't come to make you marry her. I come to keep you from doing it," he said, speaking clearly for once in his life. "Susie shan't marry a hound that would do this." And as the other advanced threateningly on him, he struck him a great blow across the mouth that sent him unconscious to the ground. So, we have got a very exciting story here. Very, very exciting. I will read you the rest later on a different day. I need my pencil. I can't find my pencil, but that's okay. Okay, so I hope that that was entertaining for you. I hope that it gave you an inspiration of wisdom. It was so you could see that a person who is a stepfather can show such gentle love for a little girl who is actually kind of an orphan because her real father doesn't come forward and her mother has died at the age of 18. So Susie is really lucky to have Lem take care of her, and she calls him Papa. And his mother, her grandmother, well, no, her step grandmother, hates her. And so you can imagine Susie wanting to get some love from somewhere. So this guy has taken her to a hotel, not to the minister. There's a difference there. You remember how Lem took the girl to the minister first. He ran to the minister and grabbed the minister and had him come to his house in the middle of the night. Well, this man wasn't doing that. He was in a hotel with her and he planned to screw her. That was a problem. Okay, so we'll see you next tomorrow. We will do this one next week. I'll see you tomorrow for another Rules Day, okay? Oh, Kinderheck!